I will become my live self right now. Welcome back to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. And we are continuing our discussion. Well, actually, really right now we're launching our major discussion on housing needs in Vermont. And we're going to begin with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency and their incredible director, Executive Director Maura Collins. And Maura, I think you know everybody, are two new members of the committee. You met David?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Senator Chittenden doesn't know that I see him every week at the indoor track meets, but I'm polite enough to not bother him on weekends to talk business. Yeah.
Well, just chat.
Yeah.
Anyway, which I'm sure you will. Anyway, it's yours.
Thank you. I'm Maura Collins. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. This is a role I've been in for a full 5 years now. I've been with the agency for 22 years. So I started as a research analyst. VHFA, I'll explain the role we play in the state. We did just celebrate our 50th birthday this year, anniversary. The legislature created us in 1974. In looking back in preparation for that anniversary, we looked at our first annual report when we had 3 staff members. And at that time, we had an executive director, a finance person, and a research analyst. That was surprising to me. So it goes to show that our research and data chops we've been building over 50 years. And in some ways, that's one thing that we're known for in this committee and in this building, is to support you all in understanding what's going on with the housing market. So I'd like to, I don't have to explain to anyone that we have a housing problem right now. You know this, the news is covering that adequately. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the needs. I'd like to talk about VHFA's role in addressing the needs. And I'd like to talk about some of the policy priorities that we have for this year, and with hopes that I will be invited back to go into a deeper dive about each of those items, because I can't do that justice in the 15 or so.
This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify this presentation you've sent to Heidi, and Heidi's putting it up on our website.
It's already up. She's so ahead of
you. Oh, and you met Heidi. Most important. Okay, great.
So the red and green chart on the left here, you can see are what nerds like I call cost burdened households. That is an academic standard of, if you can afford your home, you're paying less than 30% of your income for your housing costs, whether that be your rent and utilities, whether that be your mortgage, with your property taxes and the like. So if you're paying more than 30% of your income for your housing costs, you are at a far higher risk of being evicted or foreclosed upon, or being one bad muffler away from financial devastation, as we know that many people, not just in Vermont, but nationally, don't have the kind of savings that would provide that safety net for themselves. So you can see that overall, 31% of Vermonters are paying too much for their housing, but that need gets exacerbated when you look at renters who predominantly are lower income. And you can see that half of our renters are cost burdened, and that a full quarter of our renters are actually paying more than half their income for housing costs. That is people who are truly at risk. And rents go up every year, not necessarily in alignment with incomes. I could have showed you a graph to show how incomes have been steadily creeping up, whereas rents and home prices, for sale home prices, are going up much sharper. But instead, I'm going to show you this table on the right, which shows that just in the last few years, we know that in 2021, the median home price was around $260,000. And at that point, with a going interest rate of 3%, you would pay about $1,700 a month for your mortgage. And that meant that you could have academically afforded that if you earned about $68,000 a year. And we know that just under 25,000 renters theoretically could have made that move into a median priced home. That said, just in the last couple of years, that median for sale price has jumped up to $340,000. That's a statewide number. Your communities are different. Interest rates have really jumped up, doubled, and therefore that median priced home, half the home in the state, would cost $2,700 a month. And so you have to be earning about $110,000 a year to do that. That means that we've dropped how many renters could afford that median price home, and it's less than 10,000 now. So we've gone from a third of renters being able to make the move into homeownership to less than 15%. Also, I'll just point out that the down payment needed, what needs to be saved to move into homeownership was $52,000 a year, now is closer to $68,000 a year if you're going to try to avoid the added costs of private mortgage insurance. Now, that down payment needed is usually 20%. First-time home buyers do not put down 20%. VHFA's buyers do not put down close to 20%. So I'm not saying that's what people do. I'm saying that's what the banks require, or else there are additional guarantees or mortgage insurance that's needed in order to do that. You've also likely heard these numbers that we need between 24,000 and 36,000 homes in the state. That number originates from VHFA. I just want to make sure your committee understands it, because we will be asked about where's this number come from? As Commissioner Farrell said, DHCD is responsible for doing a housing needs assessment every 5 years. HUD requires that to get all the HUD money for affordable housing. They have to say that every 5 years they've looked at what the housing needs are today and where they're going to be in the coming 5 years. Because we're a bunch of data nerds, we get hired to do that for the state. And this chart shows you, working from the bottom up, how we get to such a high number of tens of thousands of units. And that's the fact that I'm rounding here, but 2,300 homes in the next 5 years will come offline because they are of poor quality. They will fall into disrepair. They will not meet code, and they will no longer be available. They may also change use from a primary residence to no longer available through vacation homes or something like that.
Do you have some sense of the components, the size, number of bedrooms? So you say new homes, but is there a further breakdown of the types and characteristics of the homes that are most in demand in the marketplace?
Yep, but you have to wait a slider.
Right.
Also, when we count how many homes there are and how many households there are, there's a mismatch. We have about 3,300 people who are homeless. They're living in our hotels, motels, shelters, in tents. So we need to make sure that when we're planning for how many homes we need to make sure that we have enough homes for those people to move into the housing market. And that's there. I'm not saying it's that simple that if we just build an apartment, we don't have to do anything else. We actually need to subsidize their rent and offer them services and the like. But I'm just saying, from a unit count perspective, I had to make sure that there were 3,300 of them for those households. Right. Then there's about 4,000 homes we need to normalize vacancy rates. Vacancy rates, again, I use a lot of academic generalities, but you'd expect that you'd have about a 5% vacancy rate for rental housing and 3% vacancy rate for homeownership homes. There's a higher barrier to entry for homeownership, so that lower vacancy rate is because not everyone's going to get approved for a mortgage and be able to have the income to buy a home. And we also know that we need to have more rental homes available so that there is the ability, the churn in the market, so people can move for their job, they can be recruited, land here. And so right now our vacancy rates are hovering around 1%. And so we need to get them up to something that's a bit healthier.
And healthy for homeownership is 5, and
3.
healthy for rental. Oh, so it's vice versa.
Homeownership is 3%, rental is 5%. You're always going to have more churn in the rental market, need some more vacancies there than on the homeownership side.
I haven't heard the latest reporting, but I thought I heard it from like a small trade group. Is Chittenden County's vacancy back up to 3%?
I have not heard that. I'm not saying
Okay.
it's not true.
Yeah.
Vacancy rates are really hard to come by. Chittenden County has an appraisal firm that you can pay money to who will calculate it for Chittenden County. That doesn't exist for all the other counties.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah, I thought Brad Minor was saying 3%.
yeah, he would be. the one.
Yeah, Chris has that answer when he's on there.
Okay. And then the 2 green bars here are the drivers of a lot of these units, and this is the new household growth that we expect. If you are a conservative person, you may think that our growth over the next 5 years may look more like what it looked like pre-pandemic in the years leading up to 2019 and including 2019. So if we look back at how Vermont grew up to 2019, we're going to have about 15,000 more households in Vermont in the next 5 years. If you are more bullish and you think that the growth is going to continue be what it's been like since 2020, which it has had an uptick, you have to take those 15,000 and add another 11,500 because you think that that growth is going to sustain itself. I'm a little more conservative, but I'm a lender, so you should not be surprised by that. That, I want to be clear, does not mean how many people are moving into Vermont from out of state. Okay, this just means new household formation. Some of us have kids who are graduating from college and they are a new household formation as we hope they get out of our basements. Some of us are getting divorces and one household now needs 2 homes as a result of that. Some of us are living alone longer. We know that people are marrying later. All these socioeconomic and big demographic shifts mean that our household sizes are shrinking in the US. Vermont's are shrinking even more. Our household sizes are smaller than national averages. And so a lot of this are Vermonters who are already here. They just are in smaller household sizes, which adds to demand for housing. If you look at the last many years of how much housing we've been adding, you can see that the average is somewhere between 11 or 1,200 to 3,400 homes a year. We have to more than double that if we're going to meet the needs that we just talked about in the next 5 years. And it means we have to start it today. They already have to be permitted and under construction so they can be occupied by December.
Right, Keisha.
I'm seeing, I follow a lot of housing news and I'm seeing a lot more attention paid to climate displacement. And that was before the California fires. So I just feel like it's relevant as we try to be brave with our neighbors to talk about the wave of climate displacement that's coming and how to actually project that, because so much new housing is being built in Texas and Florida and places where, like Los Angeles, a major event will make a lot of climate refugees, put a lot of climate refugees out there at once.
Yes, and we are already seeing in our neck of the woods, I've already met many new constituents who are actually here by choice because of climate.
Climate immigrants, that's like
Climate immigrants, right?
That's my parents who left 5 months before the fire.
Which was astonishing, that they anticipated.
Well,
But anyway, so we are already having people proactively choosing to be here because they, even despite our flooding, feel that Vermont is a safer place to be as the climate changes over time. So we need to double what we're doing.
So, and to do that, we need many tools in the toolbox to be able to address this. You all, for the past 2 years especially, have been looking at municipal planning and zoning. You've looked at Act 250 reform. You've been looking at a lot of the policies that will complement and bring down the cost of housing as you encourage density and as you support what needs to happen to encourage housing. You also have funding opportunities that you all have chosen. Here are a couple of the programs. This is not exhaustive. I haven't included a lot of special programs here, including the manufactured home infill program and things like that. But I want to point out that every tool you have invested in is critical. You cannot, I'm not a carpenter, but I really don't think you can get far without a saw. Like at some point, you're just going to need a saw, and you cannot assume that hammers alone are going to get the job done. So we need to have all of these things and more. Again, I can't fit in one slide all the programs, but we need to have the deeply subsidized housing that's critical to make sure that we can address the homeless needs, that we can build in our downtowns and preserve our historic structures. We need to have that deeply subsidized housing that can clean up the dirty dirt you were talking about, and do so much more and pay for, frankly, the gaps in the social safety net and the healthcare that are not covering the costs that this kind of housing supports, because it's housing that comes with services and comes with other things. Right. This is a big price tag you can see at the top. But as you can see in the second bullet or box down under deeply subsidized housing, it serves the most public policy goals. And under that, you can see that the rents are going to be cheapest. The average tenant living in this kind of housing is only $17,000 a year. And that those are permanently affordable apartments. With that level of investment, Also, not all that are state resources. That's where the big federal tax credits come into play that VHFA administers, the HUD programs, the rural development programs. There's a lot of federal resources that contribute, meaning that the state investment is something I believe a bit south of $200,000 per unit. So it does leverage, the state investment leverages more. And I would love to come back and talk about something I know Senator Clarkson has long teed up for me and wanted me to talk more about, which is that because of the ARPA investments that the state made and dedicated to housing, and because of the more investments to VHCB, it has meant that VHFA has been able to use a certain program that previously we couldn't use, and we used to send money back to the feds every year. But in the last couple of years, we've been able to use more of that. And now, if I'm right, that maybe y'all are thinking that there's not as much money to go around, I'm worried that we're going to go back to where we were, which is not fully utilizing that program. I'd love to come back and talk about that because it gets really complicated really quick.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we do need to have a conversation as a committee about how permanently affordable housing is. When we have to reinvest as a state, and how we're calculating deferred maintenance. Is that on our docket? Whose docket is that on? I look at something like Decker Towers in Burlington, and they don't even feel like they can raise the rents enough to have security in the building.
Yeah.
So when we say permanently affordable, we are going to be consistently asked to reinvest in that housing. And it should remain permanently affordable for those tenants, but we should understand the cost that everyone else bears to maintain its permanent affordability.
Absolutely. And this is a debate happening nationally. Decker Towers is public housing. And so we know that nationally public housing has been uninvested in by HUD, and the feds are shifting that burden onto the states so that we now have to pick up the pieces, and that's happening in the rural development programs and the like. And so, yes, there are burdens that are coming to us, and we need to look at the cost and impact to that.
Right. And that, sorry, permanent house, affordable housing also ranges to individual homes. And how is that, who's responsible? I mean, I'd tag on to the whole thing from Decker Towers to individual homes and who's responsible. Yeah.
So moving to homeownership, you all created through us a middle income homeownership development program. We were very grateful for. We had $24 million to build about 125 homes. Some of those are already occupied and sold to home buyers. The average size is about 1,300 square feet. They're pretty affordable. About half of those are the shared equity model that Senator Clarkson was just referencing. We're just paying 35% of the cost of developing that housing. I would be happy to talk more about that program, as well as the rental revolving loan fund, which was our way of, since this is an economic development committee as well, luring in employers to chip into the cost of housing. And what the rental revolving loan fund is a subsidized loan that VHFA could offer developers, where the tenants are earning just above the traditional government limits. And therefore, the people who get these loans are agreeing to keep a cap on those rents during the time they have that subsidized loan. And then if they pay off that loan, that money comes back to VHFA, and we could roll that forward to new developments. We funded about 265 apartments through that program. Again, those rents you're going to see are not as affordable as the deeply subsidized. So if the state only gives a little bit of money to a program, it's not going to get as much. You're not going to reach as many public policy goals. And yet, we need some saws in the toolbox. We need hammers. We need pliers. I'm out of tools that I know. But
We need it all.
Yes. And then the home improvement, the housing improvement program, VHIP, you've heard about, the administration was talking about that. That is seen as, a very efficient resource that's really working on bringing units back online, rehabilitation, bringing properties up to code, and adding ADUs.
We also need some cranes because we need much bigger tools than a hammer.
I like the way you think. This point I've already made, but I like this imagery. It's when I show up and I say that we fund affordable housing, I am not telling you the truth. It is shorthand because I only have 15 minutes. And so affordable housing I know what I mean here. I don't know that all the time I'm clear about what I'm saying. Affordable housing is what's above the waterline and what you can see. When I will see you all at ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings, we are there talking about the apartments. Sometimes we mention the downtown nature of this or that this was a historic structure. Too often we're not talking about the big behemoth, which is what's under the waterline, which is that we are helping you as a state reach your Global Warming Solutions Act goals because we are building all electric buildings, because we are investing in highly efficient HVAC systems, because we now have people with computer science degrees who are maintenance teams, because these buildings are very complicated to have their environments right. We are cleaning up the dirty dirt that you were talking about. We are a platform for social services. When the designated agencies have 20% vacancy rates, we are using housing staff to provide social services when our healthcare partners cannot. And we are expanding and investing in infrastructure for future developments. I can't tell you how often when there is a large development happening in a community that has private market for sale homes, market rate rentals, affordable housing, we're often the first ones in who pay for the roads and the sidewalks and to extend the sewer lines and all the like, because they know that we need that public investment, just like you all know that we need to be investing in infrastructure. So either you're going to do it through a budgetary act in this session, or we're going to keep doing it through housing dollars. Either way, you cannot get rid of the fact that this costs money. It makes our housing costs appear higher than they really are for just housing. Okay, if we were just plowing cornfields and putting up high-rise buildings, I promise you we could do it cheaper. But we're doing more than that in Vermont. We are achieving these other public policy goals.
And I think that's a great slide to figure out which of those is the most expensive and has the least impact, because in a housing emergency, we may not be able to do all of those things and get the units we need.
I understand that. And in 2019, sorry to break news right before a pandemic, didn't know the pandemic was coming, but we did do a report on why is the cost of developing affordable rental housing what it is. And it looks at, are we getting as much in historic tax credits as we are spending in historic renovations, preservation? Are we getting this? As you can imagine, when we invest in healthcare to provide services to people, we do not see that come back to the housing system. And I don't know of a way of calculating that. So in some ways it is a little hard to look at, but it is a value judgment about which of these things do you not want to do. I'm going to use my last two slides to just explain what VHFA's role is here. It's not just to do data, and how we work is that our operations are completely self-sustaining. We don't come to you and ask for appropriations. I'm not a state employee or a part of state government in any way. But as I mentioned, the legislature did have to authorize us to exist 50 years ago. The governor appoints our board. The board hires me. From there, I hire people like my colleague Chad here. Chad Simmons is going to be in the building just about every day of the session and is really the expert on a lot of these issues. So how we fund ourselves is that we actually have a bond deal starting right now. We need $45 million. And instead of coming to you and asking for $45 million, we're going to a group of investors. We go to Wall Street and we ask them to give us $45 million, please and thank you. They will do that and they will invest in us for the next 30 years. They will be buying oftentimes a tax exempt bond, stocks and bonds. This is a bond. Tax exempt means that whatever I pay, whatever they're investing in, they don't have to pay taxes on those earnings. So they like that because that's a smart tax strategy if you're a smarty pants financial person. So we will take $45 million for the next 30 years. We are going to turn around and we're going to give it to home buyers who want a mortgage with us that would probably be under $200,000 a pop. Or we're going to give many millions of dollars if you're a developer of affordable rental housing. You'll be hearing from Chris Donnelly in a few minutes. Champlain Housing Trust is one of those players, but there are many others, private market developers and nonprofits and public housing authorities who get our money to build the affordable rental housing. At the end of the day, these are rough numbers. We are going to receive from them because they got a mortgage from us, whether it's a single family home buyer or a rental developer, they're going to give us just over 6% interest on that money. And we can turn around and only give the investor 5% interest because they accepted a lower rate of return because they're not paying taxes on that 5%.
Right.
So they don't need the full 6. The feds govern that we can only charge just about a point. We can't have it be 3 points. Just over a point is our spread, and that's how the lights stay on at our offices. So that's how we end up being self-sustaining. Although, as I mentioned a minute ago, in the last few years, it was one of the first times we came to the legislature and said, we have some ideas of some new tools that we need to pull out of the toolbox. We couldn't work with you to provide that. To the borrower.
So just to amplify on that, when you do ask us for investment in you, those are for specific programs, not for your own self. You are self-sustaining in your function, not in your program investment. Correct.
So there are benefits to borrowing from VHFA. If you are usually a first-time home buyer, as you can see on this gray stats at the bottom, 90% of our borrowers are first-timers. You would get a lower interest rate from us than banks and credit unions and mortgage companies can sometimes offer. I'm rounding to say a half point. It changes every day. Please don't quote me exactly on that. But we usually can offer some rate benefit. We also do sell state housing tax credits to fund a revolving down payment loan program. And we also lately have been, thanks to appropriations from the legislature and supported by this committee in particular, we've been allowing we can give out a $15,000 grant to first-time home buyers who also are first-generation buyers, meaning that their parents did not own a home, or they were in the foster care system, or their parents owned a home and lost it to foreclosure. These are households where we've done extensive outreach to Black, Indigenous, and people of color-led organizations and communities, trying to get the word out about how what does not always happen, but may be more possible, is that when households have parents who own their homes and then it comes time for their grown children to buy a home, sometimes it's possible that those parents can give a financial gift to their child to help them buy their home. That's not always possible if your parent wasn't able to get the golden ticket of accumulating the wealth and assets of homeownership. I'd love to come back and talk about that program more.
Will.
We also have you all allow us to charge less in the property transfer tax when you buy a home with the VHFA program. Developers get similar but different benefits. Again, lower interest rates. It can unlock some federal tax credits if you get a loan from us. We offer very long-term financing and more generous underwriting, and sometimes we can subsidize loans like that rental revolving loan fund. So this is my final slide. I'm just going to give you a high level. I would love to come back and speak to every single one of these bullets, but at least if I could speak to maybe the first 3 in this committee, it would be wonderful. Since 2015, the state has allowed us to sell state housing tax credits to fund that down payment assistance program. That's a revolving program. We give out $5,000 to $10,000 when you buy your first home. We get it back when you sell or refi. I don't think I have to explain to you that the sales and refis in the last couple of years have not been at historical norms. No one's refinancing up to a 7% rate right now. And not a lot of people are moving, which means that we're still selling those credits and we're giving out that down payment assistance, but we don't have the benefit of that other revolving part of it. And so we would like to ask for a couple more years of selling these credits to give us time for that market to normalize. We also, that revolving loan fund that I spoke of, the program that this committee has supported to hit middle income renters who are above the income limits of affordable programs. We said that we were going to cash those developers to a 3% rent increase every year to keep the housing affordable long term. We are seeing between property tax increases and insurance increases that it is not responsible for us to keep them to a 3% limit. And sometimes they're going to need to go a little higher. I'm not going to say the sky's the limit. What I'd like to do is cross out the term 3% in statute and have it be that the developer and the property manager has to come to VHFA, we have to really look at their budgets like we do in the other 9,500 apartments that we do compliance monitoring for. And that we stick with that 3% target, but that if it needs to go a bit higher, that you give us the ability to allow for that. I'd love to continue and sustain the funding for that first generation homebuyer grant program. The next bullet has to do with the natural resources energy issue that I'd be happy to talk to people about, but it has to do with allowing for solar on affordable apartment buildings. And then now the Act 250 exemptions are much more widely available. There's a report that dropped this week that VHFA and VHCB and ACCD took the lead on, and the Land Access Opportunity Board was a part of, where it's like, okay, if people can get Act 250 exemptions more easily, how do we still encourage and incentivize the development of affordable housing in our communities if that's not the way we're going to do it? Today, a report dropped on off-site manufactured housing. This was a partnership that we did with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and VITA, the Economic Development Authority. We came together and hired some consultant, Jeff Lubell, who testified in this committee last year, and would be happy to come back and testify again. And he could speak to this report, as could any of the three of us author agencies, to talk about what are the next steps the state should take. If you want to talk about lowering the cost of housing development, incentivizing innovative construction materials and manufacturing processes. We have a whole report that looks at what's happened in Vermont, what are the current opportunities, and what should go on next. And then I know you're about to hear from Frank Knack on the Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont's priorities, and hopefully you heard the press this week about the Let's Build Homes priorities. These are two different coalitions that VHFA has been working with to build those priorities, and we're in full support of them.
Great. Thank you so much. And Keisha, and then we're going to shift to.
I think that anyone could address this, and I would ask you to come back and help us address this, but I did invite Summit Properties in, and the Middlebury students that did their research. It is in the form of a public comment on the QHCB process, or so unless it's a healthcare acronym that I just said, but anyway.
FQHC.
I think you know
the healthcare
qualified allocation plan.
Yes,
So that is a governing document that controls those federal tax credits.
Right. I think a big question weighing on my conscience, like truly keeping me up at night, is if someone comes to you and they can build 2 units of housing for $550,000 instead of 1, that alone has the market power to keep rents more stable. Mm-hmm. And we're building those 2 units instead of 1. I think that has to be the driving force of our conversation this session. I can't in good conscience think about us raising or finding $100 million for 200 units of housing. So when we look at all the tools in our toolbox, that one has been the one that we in government focus on the most. And the note that he put in that he's coming to us to present essentially says that we're spending 50% more per unit than New Hampshire and Maine. If we can't bring that down 35% to the Vermont, increase the Vermont premium of 15%, maybe over other states, but if we can't get that down, we're irresponsible, not just with people's dollars, but with the crisis of not having enough units for people to live under a roof.
Right.
So that will be my driving force. I'm just telling all the housing partners now that I cannot take my eyes off of that, and I hope you join me in that.
Right. And I think that is what we're also going to be asked to as we look at the offsite manufacturing. That's certainly a piece. Looking at creative ways that we can reduce the cost of building is certainly top priority.
An example of the Middlebury project is including 26 manufactured homes, off-site construction that will be placed, and so that's a way of bringing down.
And they're private developers, and they're doing it for a lower cost. So we need to figure that out.
So I'm going to just move us along because we have 2, and we may have to reschedule. But Maura, thank you so much. You will be back, as you know.
Thank you for having me.
We're delighted to start our year with you, and thank you, Chad. I'll get a heavy vote. Chris, let's move to Chris Donnelly, already referenced Champlain Housing Trust. And we may have to invite Frank back, let's see where we are.
I am going to share the screen.
Thank you. And Chris, you know our new members.
I know Senator Chittenden. I just met Senator Weeks. It's
You are up.
Thank you. For the record, Chris Donnelly with the Champlain Housing Trust. It's great to be here. I am I've been working at CHT for about 20 years. And my first time ever in a committee was sitting in this chair with Senator Aluzzi at the head of the table, shaking in my boots.
I hope you feel a little more comfortable.
It's not my first rodeo. So my screen's saying that my internet connection is unstable, so I hope I can go through these. Okay. Just to give you kind of a thumbnail sketch of Champlain Housing Trust. We serve the 3 northwest counties of the state. You can see some of the numbers there. We're one of several regional organizations in the state. So all of you, well, we serve Franklin County as well, but in Rutland County, there's a group that's working there actually through a merger of consolidation of some services in Rutland and Benton counties. But the nonprofit network works with a lot of the state partners to deliver the programs and the housing.
These properties that you own,
We own.
all those properties.
So we own and manage.
Own and manage, and many additional ones since COVID, because we've
Yes.
taken on a number of motels and hotels.
Yeah, so I'll get into some of the different ways that we do this in a second. This is how we see our work, just a visual. We serve the whole continuum of housing needs, and we're from people experiencing homelessness to homeownership. We focus first on safety, and we hope people become secure and mobility and opportunity. This is just a thumbnail of the last year, the kind of the production numbers. We count everything. In this last year, see, one thing that we did was out of the 300 or so households that signed a new lease with us, about 100 of them had been homeless before they moved in. I know the state's been really prioritizing helping get people out of the hotels, off the streets, and into stable housing, and we're working to play a role there. The other thing that we've been doing, and I'll go to the next slide, is we've been investing in the shelter capacity of the state. By the end of the month, or maybe early February, we will own approximately 220 shelter beds throughout Chittenden and Franklin County. That's probably the largest shelter bed provider in the state. We do this in concert with all the other service providers. We don't often actually do the services at the shelter, but we do the real estate piece. That's our expertise.
But it's sobering at this moment when you're talking about owning 220 shelter beds. We only have permanently 585 roughly shelter beds.
Right.
And we have a need of, 33,000
Right.
additional.
That's why the motel program has been
That is why.
used too much, and so we're trying to move away from that. This is a shelter that we did with Steps. Steps provides the services. It's tripled their capacity in Chittenden County, from 7 to 21 rooms or their suites. Unfortunately, at the time that we did this, they had another 40 or so that were in motels, and so the need really is great. At the end of the 5 years or 7 years, I forget exactly, we will offer this opportunity for them to own their shelter. We'll continue to manage it and own it and so forth if they want, but they will be able to have equity.
And Chris, the average time people spend in our shelters is what?
I'm not sure for Steps, but it's months. We one of the properties that we manage, the pod community in Burlington, and we shelter pods. We're finding 8 to 10 months or so before that.
Right, because it takes that long to.
Up in St. Albans, this is the first shelter that we acquired. We acquired this when the Samaritan House was transferring into the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity. Again, we do the real estate. Service provider provides the services. this is the first, we have two other shelters that we are in development now. One that's going to be with Spectrum, and one that's going to be with the domestic violence organization there. So we purchased two properties just in the last year. We're renovating them right now. We have another one that's in Burlington that we're doing. Ultimately, though, we know that the answer is housing, and this is an example of a motel that we converted very cheaply. So this was done 10 years ago, 11 years ago. This guy actually died, John, in the last year and a half. His family sent us a note saying it was so nice that he had his last 10 years in an apartment because he had been living in the woods. He was one of 21 people that we moved right straight from unsheltered homelessness into his apartment. These numbers seem silly right now, but we did this for a little bit over $100,000 per unit because we purchased a motel and then converted it. We took two rooms, combined them into one, turned one of the bathrooms into a kitchen, and one of the bathrooms into, well, one of the bathrooms in. So we really do look for ways to do things more quickly and as cheaply as we can because the resources are limited. This is a couple that were living in motels. Now they're living in an apartment in St. Albans. We did this in 2020. We opened this up in 2020. This was 300,000 unit in 2020. Talking about numbers today, it's twice as much. So it's really out of control. And again, we are really looking at ways to cut costs everywhere we can. This couple had been living in a motel, but they were in sobriety and they really needed a place to be safe. They're still there 5 years later. This downtown St. Albans has done an amazing job with their TIF district and really invested. We have a home ownership program. Too much time. I don't have enough time to talk to you about this now, but this is the shared equity program that the chair mentioned. We enter into the chain of title to ensure that the homes remain affordable. We use investment once to the outset, and then that investment stays and it grows over time so that the homes become or stay affordable forever. We can spend a whole half.
And how many home?
We have 685 or so of those right now. But we sit at the table when the transfer happens. We're able to bring in new home ownership now at 150 to 200. See this program, 200,000 for the home ownership. This is. I just want to run through a few slides on what your investment is doing. This is. If you look in the instead up there, I don't know if you know downtown Burlington, where the VFW is. At the bottom, where you come down over the hill from UVM. Down the bottom of the hill on Main Street. To the left, there's a gas station. Next to that was a VFW building. That's the inset that you see there. We've torn that down. This is some of the dirtiest dirt that you will have ever seen because it's right downtown Burlington. It's the bottom of the hill. It's on top of an old sewer ravine that was done in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And it's next to a gas station. And so we're spending close to $2 million in brownfields money just to clean up that site. But at the end of the day, we will have a 5-story building. First floor will be VFW. We'll have their post there, and then 838 apartments, 9 for people.
38 apartments.
38 apartments, 9 for exiting homelessness, 5 with a veterans preference.
Right.
And it's right downtown, right near Church Street. Great location. We're working closely with the VFW for that, with this one.
Are they investing?
They sold us the building.
At
and then-
a reasonable amount.
Yep, and then they will move in as tenants afterwards.
Sure.
This is 3 old barracks. These 3 buildings here. You can kind of see the first one in the kind of the bottom of the screen. That same night zone that we purchased. This has also a whole host of environmental concerns, the asbestos in the pipes, the lead paint, all these things. And in addition to it being a historic structure. So as when Maura showed that iceberg, this is touching a lot of those kind of things. And this is a great location at 40th Allen in Colchester. And this will turn into 68 apartments. We just opened up the first building. This is being redone by Engelberth. And I should note the first slide, we're working with Brett Morrissey. We work with all the different construction companies. The first one opened up just in November. The second one will be opening up next month, and the third one probably in May. 65 apartments. I think 15 people moving out of homelessness here.
That's great. And when will it be fully open?
I think in May.
Okay.
This is actually, I'm sorry, the Senator Hinsdale, but this is in this wing of the Tables district. This is on Shelburne Road. This is a 5-acre site that had an old motel on it that we had run at Harper Place, which was a motel that had served folks who were homeless. We tore down those buildings. And we are building 68 apartments here. You can see the first building that's being constructed at kind of the bottom of your screen. There's 2 buildings to the right that are kind of longer. Those are being renovated by Naylor and Breen. DEW Construction is doing the master site. And then at the very kind of center of the screen, you see a green building.
Yeah.
That's home ownership. And Chris Snyder, the Snyder Construction, building that for us. So we have 3 different contractors working on this site, a total of 94 homes. There'll be permanently affordable shared equity homes that will run from 150 to 200,000 for 2 to 3 bedroom apartments, or 2 to 3 bedroom townhomes, plus 68 new apartments right in Shelburne. And this is
Which is
great location,
Right on the bus line.
right on the bus line. We're really thrilled about this.
this is great.
And you can kind of see the start of it, but the location, you can see next to those 2 buildings that are getting renovated, just to the left of that, you see a little bit of water. We're going to have a stormwater pond also there that prevents runoff into Lake Champlain.
In these spots, I'm really hoping that we start going taller. And these conversations, were there any limitations that cap the number of stories we could do?
Yeah, the Shelburne had form-based code.
Mm.
And so I think this is 3 stories.
Sure.
Oh, not high enough to see the water. That's certain.
No. So, but this is great location and multiple things that we're doing. We're also needing to build a road with so there's some infrastructure costs.
So the 94 homes though are not individual lots. So it's all individual.
68 apartments and then 26
Oh,
townhomes
26. 94 homes altogether.
altogether. Yep.
Great.
This is density. This could be more dense, but this is what 80 units per acre looks like. This is just a rendering. These buildings aren't all built. This is on North Ave in Burlington. Eric Farrell is a developer. He has, as Maura was saying, oftentimes the affordable housing groups the person was in. He renovated the building in the middle, which was the old diocese orphanage and Burlington College. But we were the next building, and we on the kind of we're like one end from the top there. So we built 72 apartments. Cathedral Square built, I think, 70 apartments for seniors. And now SD Ireland, right behind us, the one that's closest to the lake, is building condos and apartments there. I think the condos go for 1.3 million. So this is going to be one of the most diverse economic neighborhoods in the state.
With shared beach front and water.
And then 12 acres were donated to the city. There's a new 12-acre park with a beach, public access to a beach.
It's great.
We have now on the drawing board another 40 apartments and 30 shared equity homes. The 40 apartments are just about fully funded, I think. The 30 homes, we're wrapping up the financing for that. We should be under construction this spring or so on this. And that's the building it's the yellowish one behind the blue one.
So can I just pause for a second? I understand that our last witness, just given our time.
Okay.
Frank, can Frank hear me? Is Frank admitted? Frank, I had not appreciated that you weren't coming in person. And I think sadly, given we are over this first time, we've been significantly over time, and to all fairness, to give you credit, we're going to need to have you back. I don't think giving you 7 minutes in a rush job when Chris is not yet finished. So, Frank, I think we're going to work to reschedule. I'm going to ask that every one of our committee members read your memo that you sent us yesterday or the day before. I can't remember which, but I have it printed out and we're going to have that posted. Have everyone take a read of it before you join us. And thank you for that document. It's terrific. I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it's terrific.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and whenever works for the community, I'm happy to join.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The first time in our fledgling life together that we're this much over time, but I hadn't.
No worries at
I
all.
was just not seeing you, and so thinking, oh, well, let's just keep going. So we're going to finish with Chris, and then we will work to reschedule you ASAP.
Perfect. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Frank, and we applaud your tenacious work. Thanks. Okay, Chris.
So the real estate development is a big piece. We have 200 homes under construction right now with another 70 to 100 on the drawing board. That pipeline, as Maura was talking about, will dry up. We will go from here and then down to here. We'll be able to access those tax credits. And so we will pretty soon you will stop seeing groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings. It's just a reality. This is just you can look at this in your time. This is just a sketch of some of the other programs that we administer in our portfolio: recovery housing, farm worker housing, the home improvement program. So you can see these. We also do a number of community centers and kind of nonprofit spaces. Again, we do a lot of real estate. We allow others to use it. Soon there'll be an announcement, I think, on the geothermal project in Heinsberg that we're excited about.
And the farm worker housing, we will be talking about more with the ag report that we're hearing jointly next week with the House Commerce Committee, and that Randy and Keisha both served on. And so we'll be
If you want someone to come in to talk about our program and that,
we will at probably another point. We're going to just have an update on that report and go through it, and then have a discussion of it, and then we'll revisit farm worker housing. Yeah.
So I just wanted to leave you with what I think of as the things to think about when you're thinking about your policies and your and funding recommendations. Is just how do we create a better system to deal with people who are homeless? How do we build more housing? How do we stimulate that and range of housing, not just the housing that we build, but how do we also make sure that some of it is affordable? And what do people need to succeed? And this is how I think about the components that goes into a state's housing platform. And so I just leave you with these questions, just as you evaluate whatever you're talking about here around housing. For me, this is a good lens to use.
This is a great list, and we're going to hope that you will help fill in some of the suggestions and some of your best ideas, as you are the expert in this area.
Okay.
So we can ask those questions and we can weigh them in our heart, but we are going to need your help and more, and everybody's, Frank's, everybody's.
There's a great network of
We have
resources
a
for you,
terrific housing network,
and we're happy to help. So
but we're going to need all of your best ideas in this challenge, both financial time and political time,
Yep.
to help navigate this.
I want to answer Senator Rob Hinsdale's question for the committee that she asked before about vacancy. So there's a report that comes out by consultants, Chittenden County, Allen Brooks Minor, that changed their names over the years, but that comes out twice a year, June and September. The December report, and it's I don't know how long we've been doing this. I don't know if you know how long we've been doing this, but each time it comes out, it's a point in time of what the vacancy rate is. That in the December it says 3.3, I think. But
Wow,
I think
it
that
shouldn't count a lot.
it's a point in time, and we like to think about vacancy as over a longer period of time. So when we look back 15, 20 years, it's been over 3% once in that time. So it may be a function of new housing that came online just that month. It's unclear, but what we like to do is like to think about this every 6 months. So we don't want to say like, oh, victory, mission accomplished.
Well, because that's not victory in Windsor County.
It's not.
That's not victory.
But you don't have the same level of data that that this group actually does calls around and looks at listings and so forth. So they actually collect really what's happening on the ground in the market in that point in time.
And who might we partner with to expand that
I would
data
call,
to be statewide?
I would talk to the commissioner about whether
Yeah.
how feasible that is. Or Marisha. I don't know if that's.
Yeah.
Well, there's a question about a lot of the data we collect. This is part of it is that when you compare that statistical area of Chittenden County, which generally that includes Franklin and Grand Isle, there are vast differences. The number that is in South Burlington and the number that is in Richford or Albury are so materially different as not to be comparable. And so it becomes a real question as to the value of the data when we're looking at it.
Well,
So HUD.
It's valuable for Chittenden County.
I understand.
Right, yeah.
But that's something that
Yeah.
we do find difficult to get over because the numbers are meaningless when used in such a large and for national purposes, very small area.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions for Chris? We will have you back and please, please start also thinking about how we answered some of these questions because our housing bill, we will hope at least to cover some pieces of this. Great. Committee, we will
Thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you very much. And Frank, we're sorry if you're still with us. Committee, we shall see you on Tuesday after the training. Remember, there's a training at 9:30. So we will start committee about